Some people to know for the Cold War unit. First off, let's talk about U.S. presidents. So Harry Truman is going to become the president right before the end of World War II when Franklin Delano Roosevelt passes away. After Mr. Truman, Dwight Eisenhower takes control, is elected. Then John F. Kennedy is elected. When JFK is assassinated, we see his Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson take control and become president. Vietnam starts during Johnson's administration. It actually kind of started during John F. Kennedy's administration, but the actual war breaks out under Johnson. Johnson is out in '69 and Richard Nixon takes place, and Vietnam continues and ends under Richard Nixon. When Nixon resigns from office with the whole Watergate scandal, Gerald Ford becomes president. Jimmy Carter is then elected in 1977, and then Ronald Reagan is elected in 1981. Ronald Reagan will see the fall of the Berlin Wall, and of course it's George H.W. Bush who is going to be the next president and see the collapse of the Soviet Union during his presidency. And of course that's Reagan over there in the corner. Now, Margaret Thatcher is the British Prime Minister from 1979 to 1990. She is a very conservative Prime Minister. She opposes Soviet communism. They call her the Iron Lady, and there's a movie about her with this name. We're going to see free trade and less government regulation of business under her, as she is very conservative. Reagan and Thatcher are going to become close friends and have a close relationship between Great Britain and the United States. And Thatcher is known for asserting Great Britain's military power, especially over issues like the Falkland Islands down by Argentina. And they're going to be a big help for the United States within all of these proxy wars. For the Russians, we're going to see Nikita Khrushchev, and I believe in the last video I got his name wrong. He is the Soviet leader from 1953 after Stalin's death until 1964. He is going to consolidate Soviet power, so strengthen the power of the Soviet government, but he does allow tourists to come visit Russia and the Soviet Union. Under Khrushchev, we're going to see the Berlin Wall built around Berlin. He is also going to place missiles in Cuba, leading to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And when Russia is forced to withdraw the missiles, Khrushchev is going to be pulled out of power. Later on, we're going to see Mikhail Gorbachev come to power, known for the birthmark on his forehead. He is the last president of the Soviet Union, ruling from 1985 to 1991. They are called presidents, however, it's not quite elected presidency, the same as in the United States. Under Gorbachev, the Berlin Wall is going to be torn down, as Gorbachev installs two new theories. The first is called glasnost, which you need to know, which is political openness and freedom of speech, so they're getting rid of censorship within the Soviet Union and the satellite states. And then perestroika, which is similar to Lenin's new economic policy, where they add elements of capitalism to the Soviet economy. So the Soviet Central Communist government is still going to own all of the big businesses and the department stores and the factories and the big farms, but if you decide that you would like to become a baker or own a shoe shop, then you may do so as a capitalist owner. So because of those, we're going to start to see that the Soviet Union becomes almost bankrupt, and that tears the Soviet Union apart. India is going to be led by Indira Gandhi. I think she's a cousin of, or the daughter-in-law of Mahatma Gandhi. She is the third Prime Minister of India, rules twice from 1966 to 77 and from 1980 to 1984. And she's going to develop the Indian nuclear program with having a closer relationship with the Soviet Union. So she gets all of the ability and know-how to create nuclear missiles from talks with the Soviet Union. So she kind of moves India away from the United States during this time period, but we know that after the fall of the Soviet Union, India develops a much closer relationship with the United States, as just recently in January 2015, President Barack Obama went to India and met with the Prime Minister of India, and they had long discussions about how to develop a closer relationship. In China, we're going to see Mao Zedong became the leader, winning the Chinese Civil War that we talked about previously. So he's the communist leader, rules from 1945 to 1976. One of the big things that he brings in is the Great Leap Forward, where there are fewer farms and more industry, trying to bring an industrial revolution to China. However, it's a failure because they move so many people from the farms to the cities to work in factories that they don't have enough farmers and therefore not enough food. And so they have massive starvation throughout the entire Chinese country. He also brings in the Cultural Revolution in order to remove all capitalist parts of their culture. You might have read a book as a kid called Red Scarf Girl, about a girl who, her family was a business owner in the early 1900s, and so because of that, they are now looked down upon as, they're a capitalist family, and so she loses her leadership status in school, even though she's really smart. She doesn't get to go to the best high school because of her family status, all of those kinds of things. So that's the Cultural Revolution. When Mao Zedong dies, we're going to see a series of other communist leaders in China. Eventually, we see the leader Deng Xiaoping emerge in 1982. He is going to continue the communist control of China's government after Mao, but he is going to lead rapid economic growth with what we call a reformed market economy, bringing back the idea of some capitalism within the Chinese economy. So they have a market economy is essentially another name for a capitalist economy. So think about what is similar between Gorbachev and Deng Xiaoping. This was actually, I believe, a question frequently seen. Both are going to lead to elements of capitalism within their communist countries, and that is going to change their communist countries for a long time. So just to get an idea of the timeline of all of these leaders and how they relate to all the events of the Cold War that we've talked about, here's a nice little timeline for you. So time is across the bottom down here. We have Mao on the bottom, and then we have Deng Xiaoping over here, the Chinese leaders, the leaders of the USSR. We have Stalin, and then Khrushchev, and then a guy named Brezhnev that we didn't talk about, and then finally Gorbachev, where they break up at the end. The U.S. is, of course, our presidents up here at the top: Truman, Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, and then Reagan, and then we have George H.W. Bush at the end. Of course, we have the Marshall Plan over here and the Truman Doctrine. The crises include the Berlin blockade. There was an uprising in Hungary that was put down by Khrushchev. Eisenhower, they thought he was going to send money, but he didn't, and so Hungary gets crushed. The Berlin Wall is built. JFK, Khrushchev, and Mao Zedong. And then we see the Cuban Missile Crisis during JFK, Khrushchev, and Mao Zedong as well as leaders. The Prague Spring is when Prague they elect a democratic government, and then Brezhnev comes in and basically destroys it and installs a communist government in Czechoslovakia again. You can see the arms race increasing with the atomic bomb, then the Soviets develop it, and then we get hydrogen bombs, and then ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and then we get others, and then SDI is Reagan's big idea of the defense initiative, which sometimes they call it Star Wars, trying to, shoot down missiles with laser guns and all that kind of stuff. Didn't work out so well. Although apparently I heard that we now have laser gun capabilities in the U.S. military today. They're just expensive and so not widely used. And then, of course, you can see our proxy wars at the top with the Korean War under Eisenhower, Stalin, and Mao Zedong. Stalin dies in the middle of the Korean War. The Vietnam War under Johnson, Nixon, Brezhnev, and Mao Zedong, and then of course the Afghanistan War, where the Soviet Union is going to invade Afghanistan under Carter and Reagan, Brezhnev, Gorbachev, and Deng Xiaoping. And with the Afghanistan War, the United States is going to support the Afghani rebels fighting against the Soviets, and so we supply weapons to this group known as the Taliban in order for them to fight against the Soviets, which of course today, in 2015 in hindsight, we know was not the greatest idea, as they in 2001 and 2003, when the United States invades Afghanistan, they used that against us. So there we have the Cold War.